Shannon and Weaver presented the following model to explain the steps of communication. According to their model, there are 8 variables that play on communication. There is the source, the encoder, the message, the channel, the decoder, the receiver, noise, and feedback. In order to understand this model thoroughly, we need to define each key element. This model begins with the source of communication. This is where the origin of the communication stands. The source can be an individual or a group that has a reason to communicate something. In other words, the communication process begins when an individual or a group want to give a message to another individual or a group. The encoder's role comes in after the source of communication has been decided. The encoder will transform a concept that the source wants to send into a format that will reach the audience who needs to interpret it. The message is the information that is being communicated from the transmitter to the receiver. Whether or not this message has a substance does not really matter. What matters is that a message is transmitted. The channel is a means to transmit the message from the transmitter to the receiver. For a message to be transmitted, it is essential that a proper means of transmission be selected. It is a route that the message takes to reach the receiver. This route can be verbal, written, electronic, audio, video, etc. As the message travels in a channel, noise comes into play. This noise is an interference or a distortion that can modify the message being sent by the transmitter or the sender in such a way that it is misconstrued. Noise can be physical, semantic, pragmatic, or rhetoric. Before the message reaches the receiver, it has to be decoded in a form that the receiver understands. This is the other side of the sequence, as when the transmitter encodes the concept he or she wants to transmit. The receiver is the recipient of the message that was sent out by the transmitter or the sender. Feedback is when the receiver tells the transmitter that he or she received the message and interpreted it accurately. Shannon and Weaver put the emphasis on this section of the model because it is the only way for the transmitter or the sender to know if the communication process was effective. This is where the model becomes cyclical.
Shannon-Weaver model of communication was created in 1948 when Claude L. Wood Shannon wrote an article entitled A Mathematical Theory of Communication in Bell System Technical Journal with Warren Weaver. Shannon was an American mathematician, whereas Weaver was a scientist. The mathematical theory later came to be known as Shannon-Weaver model of communication, or mother of all models.
Concepts in Shannon-Weaver model. Sender or information source. Sender is the person who makes the message, chooses the channel, and sends the message. Encoder or the transmitter. Encoder is the sender who uses machine, which converts message into signals or binary data. It might also directly refer to the machine. Channel. Channel is the medium used to send message. Decoder, also known as the receiver. Decoder is the machine used to convert signals or binary data into message, or the receiver who translates the message from signals. Receiver or destination. Receiver is the person who gets the message or the place where the message must reach. The receiver provides feedback according to the message. Noise. Noise is the physical disturbances like environment and people, which does not let the message get to the receiver as what is sent.
How does the model work? The sender encodes the message and sends it to the receiver through a technological channel like telephone and telegraph. The sender converts the message into codes understandable to the machine. The message is sent in codes through a medium. The receiver has to decode the message before understanding it and interpreting it. The receptor machine can also act as a decoder in some cases. The channel can have noise and the receiver might not have the capacity to decode, which might cause problems in communication process.
Here, for instance, brain might be the sender, mouth might be the encoder, which encodes to a particular language. Ear might be the channel, another person's ear might be the receptor, and his brain might be the decoder and the receiver.
The following situation is an example of the model's application. Sarah had sent a voice message to Dave telling him to do his chores. In this situation, Sarah is the sender who encoded the message, the voice recorder is the channel in which the message is sent to, and Dave is the receiver who will be decoding the message. Example of noises that could be present in the channel could be that Sarah had recorded in a noisy environment and Dave cannot hear her words.
The Osgood-Schramm model of communication in a nutshell. Have you heard of this model of communication, or any model of communication for that matter? The most likely answer is you have not. Communicating is done in a day-to-day life in so many mundane ways that we don't often get to think of the complexity of it. In this video, we will be tackling the model of communication made by Osgood and Schramm. The words may seem pretty complex, but trust me, they're easy to understand. First of all, we have the message, which is what the person is trying to communicate. For example, you want to text a friend, "Hey, wanna eat out later?" Inviting them to lunch is the message you want to tell them. Second is the encoder. The encoder is the person who sends the message and where the message originates from. Using the previous example, since you are the one who sent the message, you are the one who is entitled to be the encoder. The decoder is the person who receives the message. In this example, your friend is the person who received the message as the message was addressed to him. He is the decoder. When your friend replies back, that's when you become the decoder. Lastly, we have the interpreter. The interpreter is the one who tries to analyze and understand the message. You may be wondering, why are there 3 roles when there are only 2 people talking? Well, these roles are not so much as roles as they are processes. In the example earlier, you are the encoder who sent the text message and your friend is the decoder who received the text message. After this, he must analyze the text message. What does eat out mean? What is later? This is the role of the interpreter. There are a lot of advantages to this communication model. 1. It is dynamic, or it shows how a situation can change. 2. It shows why redundancy is an essential part of communication. 3. It shows that the sender and receiver can be the same person. 4. It shows that a communication is circular in nature. And lastly, it shows that the feedback is very important in communicating. However, it has some disadvantages too. It does not have the concept of semantic noise. Semantic noise is what happens when the sender and the receiver have different meanings for the same message. For example, your friend could interpret the message as you asking them out on a date. And for clarification, your friend responds with, "Haha, what do you mean?" The second disadvantage is that the model of communication assumes that the moment of encoding and decoding does not happen simultaneously, which is often not the case with the face-to-face discourse. People can talk at the same time or over each other, and misunderstandings can still be made, which is not illustrated in this model. Overall, the Osgood-Schramm model is a good model that illustrates feedback, a concept that is left out in some earlier models of communication. It could, however, as with all things, use some fine-tuning.
Berlo's model of communication operates on the SMCR model. This is the most basic form of communication the person engaged in today. It is less of a model and more of an identification of the parts of communication as a whole. The SMCR model relies on 4 key elements. Source, the person who originates the message. He will translate the information into a message. Message is the content that is being communicated. Then, he sends the message through a certain channel. Channel is the medium being used to transmit the message. Then, the receiver will decode the message. Receiver is the person whom the message is directed toward. This model was first developed in 1960 by David Berlo, a theoretician and founder of the communication department at Michigan State University. In 1960, David Berlo wrote a book entitled The Process of Communication. This work focused on the purpose and objectives of communication and addressed Berlo's model of communication, which he developed from Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver's mathematical model. In this book, Berlo quoted Aristotle saying that the prime goal of communication was persuasion, an attempt to sway other men to the speaker's point of view. Berlo's model includes verbal and nonverbal communication. This model used in television, newspaper, magazine ads, advertising, social media, and other forms of communication. Berlo's model could be summarized as a source delivering a message through a platform to a recipient. 2 actions are inherent in this model. Encoding happens on the sender's end, involving how the message is transmitted. The receiver must decode the message through the channel that was used. Noticeably absent in the SMCR model is feedback from the recipient back to the sender. In other words, it is a one-way process. There are factors that affect the communication process. On the source, we have communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and culture. While on the message, there are content, element, treatment, structure, and code. Then on the channel, we have seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. These are the 5 senses that will serve as the media
to deliver the message to the receiver. On the receiver, the same factors affect the communication process just like the source. We have communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and culture. Let us now study all the factors in detail. First element is the source. The source is also known as the sender, the one from whom the thoughts or information originates. He is the one responsible to transfer the information to the receiver after carefully putting his thoughts into words. The source transfers his information to the recipient with the help of communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and culture. These are the factors related to the sender and is also the same in the case of the receiver. First factor is the communication skills. The communication skill of a person is a factor that affects the communication process. If the sender has good communication skills, the message will be communicated better than if the sender's communication skills are not good. Similarly, if the receiver cannot grasp the message, then the communication will not be effective. The speaker must possess excellent communication skills to make his communication effective and create an impact among the listeners. The speaker must know where to take pauses, where to repeat the sentences, how to speak a particular sentence, how to pronounce a word, and so on. Second factor is attitudes. The attitude of the sender and the receiver creates the effect of the message. The person's attitude towards self, the receiver, and the environment change the meaning and the effect of the message. Example, as a speaker, he must portray his eagerness to impart knowledge to the audience, show his passion for his subject, and exude the level of sincerity in his emotion when communicating to his audience in order to do the same thing as he did. Third, knowledge. Familiarity with the subject of the message makes the communicated messages have their effect more. Knowledge on the subject matter makes the communicator sense the message effectively. In other words, knowledge is the clarity of information which the speaker wants to convey to the receiver. One must be thorough in what he is speaking with complete in-depth knowledge of the subject. Fourth, social system. Values, beliefs, laws, rules, religion, and many other social factors affect the sender's way of communicating the message. It creates a difference in the generation of the message. Place and situation also fall under social system. As a speaker, he must consider the social system in order for the receiver to feel the sincerity of the speaker, and probably the receiver will show his interest to listen. Example, imagine a politician delivering a speech where he proposes to construct a temple in a Muslim-dominated area. What would be the reaction of the listeners? Possibly, they would not be interested to listen. Was there any problem in the communication skills of the leader, or he didn't have the right attitude? The displeasure of the listeners was simply because the speaker ignored the social setup of the place where he was communicating. He forgot the sentiments, cultural beliefs, religious feelings of the audience. Had it been a Hindu-dominated society, his speech would have been very impressive. The last factor is culture. The cultural differences makes messages different. A person from one culture might find something offensive, which is very much accepted in another culture. Culture refers to the cultural background of the community or the listeners, where the speaker is communicating or delivering his speech. As a speaker, he must be sensitive in every word or action that he will utter and portray, if he wants his audience to listen. Those are the factors affecting the source. Second element, message. A message is a substance that is being sent by the sender to the receiver. It might be in the form of voice, audio, text, video, or other media. When an individual converts his thoughts into words, a message is created. This is called encoding. There are 5 key factors affecting the message. First, content. Content is the thing that is in the message. The whole message from beginning to end is the content. Content is the script of the conversation. It is in simpler words the backbone of any communication. It is very important for the speakers to carefully choose the words and take good care of the content of the speech. The content has to be sensible, accurate, related to the thought to hit the listeners bang on and create an immediate impact. Second element. Elements are the nonverbal things that tag along with the content like gestures, signs, language, etc. It has been observed that speech alone cannot bring a difference in communication. Keep on constantly speaking, and the listeners will definitely lose interest after some time. The speech must be coupled with lots of hand movements, gestures, postures, facial expressions, body movements to capture the attention of the listeners and make the speech impressive. All of these gestures come under the elements of the message. Third, treatment. Treatment is the way one treats his message and is conveyed to the listeners or receiver. It also affects the feedback of the receiver. One must understand the importance of the message and must know how to handle it. If a boss wants to fire any of his employees, he has to be authoritative and can't express his message in a casual way. This is referred to as the treatment of the message. One must understand how to present his message so that the message is conveyed in the most accurate form. Next, structure. The structure of the message or the way it has been structured or arranged affects the effectiveness of the message. A message cannot be expressed in one go. The speaker must think about how he will organize his message in such a way that the receiver could get his interest to listen and grasp the message. The last one is code. It is the form in which the message is sent. It might be in the form of language, text, video, etc. Enter the wrong code of locks will never open. Enter a wrong password, you will not be able to open your email account. In the same way, the code has to be correct in communication. Your body movements, your language, your expressions, your gestures are the codes of the message and have to be accurate. Otherwise, the message gets distorted and the recipient will never be able to decode the correct information. Those are the factors affecting the message. The third element is channel. Channel is the medium used to send the message. In mass communication and other forms of communication, technical machines might be used as channel, like a telephone, internet, etc. But in general communication, the five senses of human being are the channel for the communication flow, and it affects the effectiveness of the channel. First factor, hearing. The receiver could receive the message through the sounds that the speaker uttered. Second, seeing. The receiver could perceive the message through the visual materials displayed in any platform used by the speaker, like pictures, graphs, cinema, and video films, videotapes, paintings, drawings, cartoons, prints, designs, etc. Then, touching. The receiver could get a message when he holds, caresses, feels, or anything that encounters something with his hand like holding hands. Smelling. The receiver could receive the message through the smelling like the aroma of coffee or flower. Then the last one, tasting. Taste also provides the information to be sent as a message. All five senses are the channels that help human beings to communicate with each other. The last element is receiver. When the message reaches the receiver, he tries to understand what the listener wants to convey and then responds accordingly. This is also called as decoding. The receiver should be on the same platform as the speaker for a smooth flow of information and better understanding of the message. He should possess good communication skills to understand what the speaker is trying to convey. He should have the right attitude to understand the message in a positive way. His knowledge should also be at par with the speaker and must know about the subject. He should also be from the same social and cultural background, just like the speaker. Criticisms of Berlo's SMCR model. There is no concept of feedback, so the effect is not considered. There is no concept of noise or any kind of barriers in communication process. It is a linear model of communication. There is no two-way communication. Both of the speaker and the receiver must be similar according to all factors mentioned above, or must be on a common ground for smooth conversation, which is sometimes not practical in the real scenario.
Alan Monroe developed this framework in the 1930s while he was a speech professor at Purdue University. It's a 5-part framework designed specifically for persuasive presentations, and it's designed to prompt listeners to take immediate action at the end of the presentation. There are 5 steps to it. We're going to go over these in more detail as the video progresses: attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. So let's explore the psychology of this framework. So first, you grab your audience's attention, much the same way you might in an ordinary informative presentation. You're using stories, statistics, you're using nice quotations that grab people's attention. In a regular introduction, though, you're going to have other things like a thesis and a preview, but really this whole step in Monroe's motivated sequence is devoted to grabbing people's attention. So you're going to stack up a lot of these techniques. You might use not just a story, but a quotation, some rhetorical questions, some statistics, all stacked up and jammed into this attention step so that you really grab people's attention. Then you transition to what's called the need portion of the presentation framework. And here's where they're starting to feel a little lower because you are showing them there's a great need associated with the topic that you're talking about. So here again, you're sharing stories, statistics, and everything else, but it's devoted to convincing people that there is a need. Remember, at the end of this, you want them to take some kind of action, and they're not likely to do that unless they're first convinced that there is an actual need. So now you're going to help them feel a little bit better. You're going to tell them there is a solution. There's a way to satisfy the need that you have articulated. And here's where you explain in quite detail the exact steps that you want them to follow. And by doing so, you create a solution to the need that you have just articulated. So now they're feeling a little bit better. The next step is visualization, where you're going to help them literally picture what life will look like if they adopt the particular solution or satisfaction step that you are recommending. And so now they're going to move up on the scale and feel a little bit better about life because you're like, hey, I showed you what the satisfaction step was, and now I'm going to help you visualize it. So you're telling stories, showing photos, whatever it takes to show them all the benefits that they will feel because they adopted your particular satisfaction step. So the last step is called the action step. Some people call this literally the call to action, where you ask your audience to do something right there and then. You ask them for their email address, you ask them to text a certain number, some type of action that they are taking forward toward the solution step, the satisfaction step that you have already outlined. And here they should be the happiest, so they're way up on the scale because they're actually taking part in solving that need that you articulated earlier. They're starting to feel really good about themselves because they're participating in this solution personally. So I like to outline it this way to show you how first they're feeling okay, then they're not feeling so good in that need step, but then they go up, up, up toward the action step. So there's some psychology here. First, you're making them feel that need, and then you're helping satisfy that need. So there's that persuasive and motivating element to it. And I think that the magic of this model really is in that need step. If you can convince your listeners that there's a strong enough why should they care? Why should they take action? Is this really a need in the first place? They'll be that much more motivated to take the ultimate action that you're going to ask them to. If you haven't convinced them that there's a real need, they will not be as likely to adopt the solution that you're proposing. So let's look at some concrete examples. So here we have a blank framework, and just imagine you're going to ultimately try to sell your listeners a mattress. Well, there are some steps that you need to follow before you ask for that sale. The first thing you want to do is grab their attention by talking about statistics involving sleep and how important sleep is and how crucial it is to living your life. Next, you're going to convince them that they have a particular need by talking about the effects that a lack of sleep has on their mood, their health, and their effectiveness at work. You're showing them that they have a need for better sleep. And you do this again, statistics, stories, quotations, any tool that you have in your toolbox to carve out this need. And now you get to your pitch. You help them satisfy this need by showing them this new type of mattress, let's say, that you are selling that you want them to buy. And then you get them to picture what life would be like with this mattress through photos, through stories, through statistics, again, any tool that you have in your toolbox. And when you get them to picture this, the visualization step, you want to make sure you erase whatever needs you said they had to begin with. So this is going to help their mood, their health, their effectiveness at work. And once you do that, some of them will be ready to take an action. This is where you make some kind of call to action. Have them text the number, have them fill out a form, have them supply their email. Maybe if you're right at the point of purchase, you're going to ask them for that sale. Ask them if they're ready to go to the register and ring this up. Let's